Hey, what's up guys? JB here. Brand new unit joining us here in War of the Visions this week, coming over from the FFBE side, and it's none other than Saul. Of course, he was the big bad of season 1 of that story over there. This has been a hugely hyped and talked about unit over in JP, where he really hasn't even been out that long. It's only been about a month, but he has really taken over much of the top-end PvP game. Cool character, incredible artwork, but why exactly has he taken the game by storm? Well, let's dive into it and let's see what makes him tick. So Saul is going to be joining War of the Visions as a 100 cost fire unit, and he's going to be repping that staff Devout group. He's got base 3-1 movement, and he can wear hats and cloth. Starting here with the TMR, this one is going to be his robe. We have a party buff here of 20 physical human killer, while at the same time reducing your own hate by 6. This one's pretty decent. I think those human killer effects can be pretty solid, especially if you're trying to maybe amplify the follow-up attacks that have come in recently on units like Irvine or Bart's. You know, you could really get some power there, I think, with this type of effect. Moving on to the stats here next, and we have an absolutely phenomenal stat line here for Saul. True bruiser potential here in terms of the HP and magic especially. I can't really recall the last time we've seen a mage up here with this type of HP in quite a while. He's going to be very solid with that, with just over 4,308 hit points. That base magic really going to be jumping off the page here as well. 437 base, which is second in the game currently, only behind Heaven's Blade Howlet. It really doesn't stop there though. He's got a very good luck total at 259, which I believe has him in the top 20 for that as well. So that's going to help out his accuracy, of course, but definitely that crit evasion. You can see that bar is way up there. He's actually the top crit evader in the entire game. On that note of accuracy, his base level 165 is very much average, but he does have access to 2 different passives that he can potentially equip, which would actually put him towards the top end of the game if you were to use both of them. I definitely don't think that that's his best build, and I don't think it will be very common, but it's really not a terrible build if you do look at it, and it is there if you do need it and want to use it. Really, the only weakness here for Saul statistically is going to be that dex and crit value, which, you know, they do go hand in hand. So while it is extremely difficult to crit this unit, he himself is not really going to be putting out any crits to the enemies either. Moving down now into the defensive picture, and he's got 6 defense and 0 spirit. Very strong resistances though. He's got 20% to slash, an incredible 35% against strike, and then he comes in at 10% against magic. We do have 2 weaknesses here though, at 5% against missile, and then 10% against pierce is going to be his weakest of the bunch. On the ailment front, he's got 50% against slow and stop, and then he's got 10% against poison. So all of that is very good, but Gumi, I think, has been kind of on a poison kick lately. Saul himself has it. Melnia has it, you know, whenever we end up getting her. And the new Astrius unit who just came out over in JP, he does have access to poison as well. Looking at the mastery here next, 10 unit resistance and 20% reaction block. Definitely 2 very sought after stats there for the current meta. And if you do take him all the way up to level 140, he's going to get that 10% strike res, which I did factor into that total that we just looked at. He is going to be getting a massive 30% crit evasion here, which is a big part at why he is so good at avoiding those. He is going to be picking up a Job 25 skill upgrade there on top, which we will look at there in the skills overview. Now, in terms of passives here for Saul, I think for general play, he's got a couple of really standout ones, which I've highlighted here. Especially that first one, he's going to be getting a huge offensive boost there with both spirit and magic res penetration. He's also going to be picking up a healthy dose of healing power, which is definitely going to be important for some of the skills he has access to in his kit. Now, the second one I think is going to be pretty unique as well. He's going to be getting some unit resistance, as well as a reduction in his hate value, and then an innate float status on top of that. And that does actually make him immune to several strike-based attacks out there, including Perrine's Vortex Kick. For a counter ability, he's going to have 70% chance to proc against either slash or strike damage, and when he does trigger that, it's going to give him a 40% damage reduction. So already we can see the picture developing here that Saul is very much set to come in and put a stop to that strike meta that is going on currently. Alright guys, moving now into the main kit, and we're going to start with the buffs. His self buff is going to provide 40% magic as well as an incredible 50 crit evasion, and then an all new area damage mitigation mechanic. You may have noticed within his stats that Saul doesn't have access to any area resist innately, which is definitely much different than we've seen on any of the units that have come in as of late. And with the unit resistance that this character is able to achieve, that area damage is really going to be the best way to get at Saul. All is not lost there for him though. This 3-turn buff here is going to help him out in that department quite a bit. And basically how this works is that the mitigation on this will increase, depending on how large of an area of effect that we're talking about. Now, I've heard some differing reports on how potent it can potentially be, but I do believe that this maxes out at a 35 to 40% damage reduction at the largest AoE, which is currently that diamond AoE that we've seen in the game, which is 13 tiles in size. Now, this will go as low as a 10% reduction if you are looking at a small AoE, which is a cross AoE of 4 tiles. So I think based on that, you can roughly estimate that this is, between 2 to 3% of mitigation per tile of that area of effect. Now, there's not currently any way to dispel this status, but it does just last for 3 turns after he puts it on. Now, Saul's party buff here is going to provide him a 7,500 HP physical barrier, and then it will provide both protect and strike resistance to himself and his allies. Now, that strike resist is variable, so for non-fire element units, that's going to be a 15% buff. But for units within his own element, it's going to be a massive 35% strike resistance. So again, really hard countering those strike units out there. Now, in terms of the auto AI, the nice thing about these buffs when they do carry a physical HP barrier, that means that he's not going to run around, double buffing this or triple buffing this in battle. He's going to move on to his next buff in line, which is certainly nice for ease of use. So let's take a look at Saul's attacks here next. The first one here is going to be his low AP attack. It's got a range 3 with a range height of 1. It's coming in with that standard low 121% mod. And this one's going to be his only guaranteed hit here in the kit. It's also a non-elemental attack. So 2 ways that this is actually going to help him out. If he hasn't spec'd for his accuracy, as we talked about, this is going to be his go-to move against any evaders. But this is also something that he can use against units that may have really stacked up their fire resistance, and this is going to give him a way to sort of get around that. Now, his second attack here is going to be up to a range of 5 there on the cross AoE. It's coming in with that large 200% modifier. Now, depending on how many units you actually catch there in the AoE, this does have an escalating conditional modifier. It's going to max out at a potential 275% if you do catch 3 units in there. Now, this does have a post-damage status effect, and this is something that's actually currently misquoted on WoTVcalc.com. There it says it's actually a 50% chance base. It's actually a 25% base chance, and then it has a 25% potential increase depending on the status of your target. So if they have an AP restore, or if they're hasted or berserked, you're going to get up to that maximum 50% chance to poison. Now, Saul, as a magic damage dealer, you're going to want his faith at 97. So assuming that you do get that conditional increase, he's going to have a very nice chance here of landing that poison. Now, Saul's third attack here is going to be a select 2. This is something we've been seeing more and more now coming into the game, as we're sort of firmly now within this unit attack meta. Quite a nice skill here though, as this one will break magic barriers prior to the damage, and similar to Elias Stag's impact, this one does have a range 5 with a range height of 2, so making it very flexible in who you're able to target with it. This one does have 2 post-damage effects coming in as well. It's going to sap 15 AP from your targets, and then it will trigger a sequential ability. That's a mechanic that we first saw introduced with Ferris a couple of months ago. He's going to cure his allies with a 120% potency heal. So that's going to be the equivalent of a cure or a cura spell. Now again, similar to Ferris, this is sort of giving him a bit of roll compression here. Not only is he going to be putting out that nice damage, but giving your team a bit of healing support there on top of it. This one is also a 2-hit attack, so going to be a little bit of elemental chaining there as well. Skill number 4 is going to be another select 2 for Saul. It's a bit more limited in its range this time. This one's a range 4 with a range height of 1. On this attack is also going to be a little bit lower of a mod here. It's got a medium 165%. Now, prior to the damage, this one will dispel courage, And then similar to the last one, this one does have a healing component tied into it. And if I understand this one correctly, this one is going to trigger on a kill shot. If you kill one enemy, it's going to give you a 120% potency heal. But if you do kill two, that's going to double. It's going to go to a 240% potency heal. And that's just healing himself there on that one. So again, another very strong ability here, especially when you consider many of the top units out there being used do rely heavily on that courage mechanic for their survival. So this gives him a very nice way to deal with that. Now, last but not least, we do have the Limit Burst. This one's going to give him a large diamond AoE, so maxing out at that range of 5. Now, once again, this is a non-elemental attack for Saul. 2 effects are going to be coming in here prior to the damage. And this one dispels Shell, and then once again, it is dispelling Courage here. Now, post-damage, we are going to have a 67% chance to land Poison. So this being such a large AoE, it's going to be absolutely devastating if he hits multiple units with this and lands that Poison. And if he does, 3 additional debuffs are going to be applied to you. It's going to be a reduction of 40% to your attack, 50% to your healing power, and then also 25% against your fire resistance. So incredibly strong Limit Burst. This guy just absolutely hates the courage status. Not only will he dispel it off you directly, but he's got multiple ways to deal with that because he does have that poison there as well. So there is a new vision card that's coming in alongside Saul, and this one is called Zenith Beneath the Stars. I absolutely love the artwork on this card, kind of calling back once again to that Season 1 of FFBE. Of course, you have the heroes there with Rain, Laswell, and Fina going up against that big bad in Saul. So absolutely love the artwork here as always, but this one in particular I think is pretty close to my heart. Now the main party effect on this one is going to be one that's very much sought after. It's going to have that 15% agility while also adding in some chain resistance and magical human killer. Now this card, in addition to being effective for Saul's class, which is Devout, it's also going to be effective on Greatswords and Warriors as well. Now this is one of the few cards that does have unit resistance there in the bestowed effect, so can make it very, very nice for sort of stacking that up as high as you can. And definitely is going to be helpful in this current unit attack meta. Now in terms of these job cards, agility cards I'd say are always ones that you should consider looking at and consider pulling. It's definitely one of the prime party effects and one of the best ones to allow, for your team building. I think this could be a very nice pickup for fire players. If you look there at the units involved, this is a very nice mono fire card. It includes many of the most recent units that have been released for the elements. And I'd say the main value add here, if you do have maybe the other fire agility cards like Sorrows or Brachio, if you were interested maybe in a more magic heavy fire team, maybe using Saul and Rain, maybe throwing in a Shawls or Minwoo there into the party, I think this is going to be a lot more optimal for that setup. Brachio card and Sorrows are both, heavily catered towards physical units, especially with their base stats, so you can get a little bit more optimized here with your party if that is your goal. Alright guys, so let's take a deeper look now at Saul's weapon group, which is the Devout class there as we mentioned. Now this is actually another one that has really quietly sort of built up a very nice collection of cards here, and with the addition of this new Saul card, you can really start putting together some nice teams with it in my view. And I think that's really going to start paving the way for units like Amnelis and maybe Ranon and Resnick to start seeing some meaningful rainbow play, within those kind of parties here with Saul. Now, I would say that one of the key cards for this group is Silver Memories, which is part of the permanent pool. It's this one here featuring Minwoo. Now, this one does get 60% magic and 20% area resist as the main party effects. So really, really hard to top, in terms of the effects here for these magic heavy parties. Now, there are a couple of, multi-job angles that you could look at, when you are kind of considering what other jobs could you pull in to use with Devout. One of them, I think, has been that Devout and Greatsword combination. Not only are they featured on that Minwoo card, but also on this new Saul card for the agility. So obviously, there is no tank here within the Devout group, so that is, one way you could look to pull one in. Within Greatsword, you could look at somebody like Rain, or perhaps even Joom for that connection. So solid stuff all around there, and I think the support for him here in this group is definitely one of the reasons why he is so good. So I have two builds this week, so I'm just going to quickly touch on the major points here. The first one is going to be more of a traditional mono fire team, and the idea here is going to be going for that anti-strike niche that Saul has, and certainly that's going to be fitting right within his wheelhouse. Now today I'm going to be pairing him with King Mont with his LB upgrade, giving him that physical damage reduction for the team. That's really going to help us take some hits from Alaya and other strikers out there. And of course it's going to layer very nicely with Saul bringing in that protect and strike resistance buff for the party. Now, as a secondary damage dealer, I am going to be using Satya. I really like her bringing that fire and peril there to the team, but also that secondary damage type of missile that not many people out there are currently guarding against. Now, certainly there are quite a lot of options within fire that you could add in there. You could look at, somebody like Yuffie, you could look at maybe even Kefka or another magic damage dealer. So fire is definitely not hurting for any options here, but I do really like Satya. So jumping into the loadout, there is a new staff that comes with Saul, and that's going to give him some strike resistance and reaction block, so that is going to be featured here in the build. And we got to have that survival vest there for that unit resistance. And then for the TMR, I am using Dialdo's for that crit evasion and agility. Now for an Esper, I'm going to be using Bahamut, and it's going to be spec'd with strike resistance. For the vision cards, I'm going to have that Fire Bros card. Actually, on our global version, it does have a unique bestowed ability for our side of the game, which gives 15 strike resistance to fire units, so that's going to help us out here quite a bit in the build as well. It's going to allow us to get to a null strike resistance once Saul gets his party buff there online. Now I'm going to be pairing that with the Death Machine card for the area resistance and crit evasion, and the Brachiosaur for agility and unit resistance. We're going to be doubling up on that unit resistance actually there with Tetra in the sub slot, and I'm going to be bringing in some fire attack and agility on the other cards as well. So just quickly taking a look here at this Trust Stones, we are sort of building against that current strike meta, bringing in some strike resistance as well as some lightning resistance. But I do really like that within a spirit set to get that additional healing power here for Saul. That's really going to amp up the power of that sequential ability that we looked at. On the right side, just some common offensive effects here, but I do tie that into an agility set just to get him as fast as I can there on the battlefield. Alright guys, so the second build here is going to be that Devout angle that we were talking about. This time we want to lean more into that anti-magic. Maybe you want to use your own Saul to counter another Saul team that you're seeing out there in the game. And maybe they're using a classic fire team. So through that Devout Greatsword synergy, I'm going to be pulling in Rain to tank for my team. He is our original magic tank and still actually one of the better ones out there in the game. He does also have that niche of being very heavily resistant against area damage. And then as a second damage dealer here, I'm going to pull in Amnelis, who is another Devout mage. Now Amnelis, of course, is going to be able to pass magic barriers. She does have that triggered heal back that she can pass the team as well. And in general, she's a pretty strong anti-magic unit. Now in terms of the equipment, it's going to be identical here to the last builds, but this time I am going to be speccing Bahamut with magic resistance instead of strike. We will use Saul's new vision card that we looked at for the agility, silver memories for the area resistance and magic, and then on Rain, we're going to just use that old rainbow standby of Odin there for the unit resistance. Now, even with the secondary cards here, they're not going to be all affecting Rain. For this purpose, I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm not really looking for any damage here out of Rain. I just need him to pull that hate and tank some hits for my team. Maybe he can throw out that fire and peril, or maybe even slow the enemies there as well. And if he's done those things, I think he's done more than enough. Now, in terms of the Trust Stones here in the build, we are going to be adjusting them a little bit from the last one. Rather than going in against that anti-lightning and strike, we are focusing our build more against fire, magic, and poison. So those are the builds, guys. One of my goals for this section here in this new review format is really to try to distill and cut it down. And I found in my last few reviews, I've actually been getting away with that and kind of going back to my old ways. So I've given my general premise and outline of my ideas here. So I'm going to cut it there. So you can pause it and you can look at them. I always do include in the description the links to these builds, so you can go there directly and look at them as well. So definitely check that out if you want to take a closer look. So what is my verdict today on Saul? Starting with the positives, unlike many other mages out there, this is one who can be put up on the front line and take physical hits very well, while at the same time being perhaps the most stout unit in the game when it comes against that strike damage specifically. And not only that, he does make his team better against strike as well with that great party buff that we looked at. Now on top of that, this unit is bringing in a bit of roll compression via that sequential ability, with his marquee attack not only putting out nice damage, but also healing up his ally at the same time. Now speaking of damage, Saul's is very flexible. Not only are the majority of his spells instant cast, but he does also have access to several non-elemental attacks both within his main job and sub-job. Now last but not least, he's got an absolutely cracked limit burst, which gives him access to a large diamond AoE, not only offering good utility and damage, but with a very high chance to poison its targets, giving him even more effective damage as the fight wears on, which allows him to whittle down and outlast his opponents. Now on the more negative side, similar to Elia, unless Saul is built in a very specific way, he really is lacking when it comes to his innate accuracy, and he can definitely be exposed by evade units out there. Although he does have that low damage, single target, 100% hit ability that we looked at. Now bucking on recent unit trends, Saul is completely lacking when it comes to his area resistance, making him much more susceptible to those styles of attacks, perhaps opening the door for some previous metastars to come back in and shine once again. Saul is also heavily reliant on that physical barrier that he has, and really lacks for any additional survival mechanics that come behind that. Things like a re-raise or courage, reflex, or etc. Now my last point here is a pretty universal one when it comes to looking at these high faith mage type units, but definitely something to sort of keep in mind when you are using and building Saul. His faith is going to be maxed out at 97, so you really need to be wary of those status ailments out there. Things like a silence, a berserk, or a sleep are all things that can effectively shut this unit down completely. At the end of the day though, this is a unit that, at least in terms of the stars of our current meta, is really set to counter and one-up pretty much all of them. And he has the power to shut down that strike meta as we know it. He puts out great damage, he supports your team, and he's one of the hardest counters against that courage mechanic that we've seen come into the game to date. He is a defining part of this unit attack meta that we're currently experiencing. So there it is, guys. Those are my thoughts today on Saul. I love these Brawly Mage units, and this guy just fits that to a T. Let me know what you guys think about this unit. Are we going to continue to see this level of power creep, or are they just setting the table here for the next 5 to 6 months, much like they did with Bradley and Sephiroth back around the 3rd anniversary? Hit me up in the comments down below and let me know your thoughts. While you're down there, if you enjoyed the video today, hit that like button for me. It really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. And if you like what I'm doing here on the channel, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more. And that's really all that I have to say for today. So as always, stay safe out there, and I'll see you guys in the next one.